the only thing I will
talk for people lost in the snowdrift, but we're assuming that they're all here by now. So, welcome. We're here for the South Coast Rail Task Force. I'm Susan Teal. I'm the chair of the task force, and we're going to start by having a welcome from the park by Jan De Silva. Jan, do you want to speak up? And
let me know if can you all hear me?
No.
No. Okay. I'm Jan De Silva. Right now I'm acting chief of interpretation. Normally I'm the cultural resource specialist. And the park was formed in 1996 as a 34-acre park, encompasses most of the downtown and a little bit across Route 18. And the mission of the park is to celebrate and interpret the history of whaling in the New Bedford community. Not sure, should know, New Bedford was like the capital of whaling in the 19th century. Took it over from Nantucket, and based on that, in 1859, New Bedford was the wealthiest per capita city in the United States. Everybody could have $1,000 from the proceeds from the whaling industry. What are we doing here at the park? Because I know that's what they asked me to speak about. Right now, we are embarking on a project to kind of look at programming this space right now. We received funding. We just met with our contractors, so we're going to work on how we're going to use this space in the future. We plan on having some new exhibits and new things installed by the end of 2016, so that's our biggest project that we're working on right now. So we're looking forward to all of that happening, and I will take my leave of you now. Unless you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but I hope you have a great meeting.
any questions for Jan? Okay, thank you very much. The experience with the task force has been long and interesting, and sometimes painful. Before I chaired this, John Bullard was the chair, and I always got to sit next to Lou. And Lou and I have been sitting next to one another for 15 or 20 years at these task force meetings. So we've been at this for some time. So I wanted to do a quick summary, and I'll tell you that in the cover letter that we sent to the selectmen and all the organizations, we covered the points that I'm going to make. It's just that sometimes you skim over the cover letter and don't really read it. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to tell you what we already told you. Okay? So we originally started as a South Coast Rail Task Force in the late 1990s. And this is the quote: "We were set up to help communities deal in a coordinated fashion with the environmental and growth impacts of commuter rail by considering local and regional growth management planning." That's kind of a long sentence for what we do, but what we essentially did was to prepare for the reestablishment of rail to the South Coast by doing three things. One was education, outreach, and technical assistance. And as almost every community in the region knows, we've had over 100 technical assistance projects. We're going to hear from Jill today about one that's just been done here in New Bedford. I think one of the things that we did was precedent making for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is the establishment of the priority development and priority protected area, the maps and the language and the understanding that went with the development of those graphics really shows how growth can happen within our region with or without rail. So that was a very useful project. But I think from my perspective, looking back to 1999, the most important thing that our Commuter Rail Task Force did was to establish smart growth as a principle for a transportation project. Rather than just building a road or building a railroad, we were building a community, looking at the economics, the social, the educational, the cultural aspects of what would happen with the reestablishment of rail in our region. And that smart growth strategy, I think, has really paid off. We've learned a tremendous amount about our communities, about our region, and how we can become stronger with a little bit of nudging here and there from various federal and state programs. But now we've sort of finished that. The preferred alternative has been decided. As you all know, it's the Stoughton Electric, and So is there any further need for a task force? Well, Jean and Steve and I have been meeting repeatedly to discuss that, and we decided that, first of all, that we have a new function now. We're past the first pay part. The Army Corps has done its bit. So we have a new name, and we're now known as the South Coast Rail Task Force. And we have a new function to expand upon the functions that were listed in our 1999 birth certificate. And what we're really looking for is an alliance among the region's cities and towns, the interest groups, the environmental organizations, the nonprofits, to work together to ensure that environmental justice, economic development, and resource protection are part of the South Coast Rail project. So that, I think, is covered in the umbrella in our birth certificate, but we've made it more explicit in the letter we sent out 2 weeks ago. And our rationale for continuing to function as a task force is that we really need the cities and towns to continue to work together. This is a collaboration. And so we have to have cooperation amongst all of us to maximize South Coast Rail's benefits. We really need the regional organizations who are concerned with our future to remain engaged in the South Coast Rail planning process and have a forum in which they can get accurate updates on what's happening, which is mostly what Jean brings to us. We need to make it easy for all the citizens in the region to have access to the planning process. So our webpage, our meetings, the things that we distribute on the internet, and so forth. And finally, we all feel we need to have the South Coast Rail be the very best project it can possibly be for our region. There's one thing we're not going to be doing as a task force, and that is we're not involved in community-by-community mitigation discussions. We're not going to talk about how each little town is going to deal with mitigation issues, but we are going to focus on our regional perspective. We're going to address regional impacts of mitigation measures because we're really here to enhance the region, not a single community. So we really want the mitigation to be not only positive for each community in which it occurs or doesn't occur, but for the region as a whole. And we really need to continue to have easy opportunities for civic engagement between project planners, who can sometimes get carried away in their planning, and the citizens of the region. So that's what we will be doing. That's the end of my spiel. You can read it all in the letter. It would be faster. But so unless there are any questions, we'll go on to Jill's technical assistance presentation for the City of New Bedford.
I just have, this may just be semantics, but when I read this letter, I was a little confused, and I'm a little confused about what you said, because the task force was created from the Secretary's certificate, and the purpose of the task force was not to be focused on route selection and alternatives. That was never our focus. Our focus was always, and I've been here since the first meeting, our focus was always to help the communities in the South Coast region deal with the effects of a transportation project that would ultimately be built, whatever that may be, because as you know, with any benefits that may come with a train, there's also detriments. And so the whole purpose of the task force was to help the communities and do what we were doing, but we were never supposed to help with alternative selection, route selection, any of that. We were always geared towards how do we make sure that the negatives associated with this project don't overwhelm these cities and towns, and how can we exacerbate the positives. So I guess I don't really understand any kind of evolution, and I guess I question if the task force, I mean, I think I agree that it should still be in place, but I don't think that our purpose is changing.
What I tried to express was that we're still under the umbrella of our original purpose, but that we're in some ways looking more specifically. Earlier, 5 and 10 years ago, we weren't looking at regional mitigation issues. I think those are now coming to the fore. They were in the background before. Those are issues that affect the communities. And I don't disagree with what Kyla said. What I would say is that while our task force was never charged with making any decisions, although many of us would have loved to, we were in the position of responding to and reacting to various pieces of the plan as it evolved. And so while we did not choose an alternative route, we did comment on the pluses and minuses. We looked at the cost, the time of travel, we looked at environmental issues, we reviewed the station issues, all those things we talked about, but we don't decide anything. We use our sharp elbows as much as we can to get things done, but we're not, as a task force, given a job of making any decisions. So I didn't mean to imply that we were part of choosing a route. We helped to inform the process by commenting on the information that was given to us at our various task force meetings. I think that's a better way to summarize it.
Just add, you're right, the original mandate for this task force didn't talk about routes, but for the first 10 years or so of the task force existence, there were multiple alternatives that were on the table. So the task force did talk about those at different stages and talked about their merits. So while the charge didn't say, look at the alternatives, they were all in play and we were talking about them. And we wanted to make clear that we are now focused on the single alternative, and you're right, to look at the pros and cons and make it the best possible alternative for our region.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I apologize, I have a little cough today. I've been with the city for 9 years. Next month, actually, is my anniversary date. In that time, I've really seen the city change quite a bit, especially the downtown area which you're in. As Jan mentioned, this is the national park. It's been a tremendous anchor, and they're a great partner with the city, along with the University of Massachusetts College of Visual and Performing Arts, which is also downtown, and has brought a lot of students, a lot of activity in this area. With that, we've also undertaken a lot of planning under this administration and the past. We completed our first city master plan since 1964. It was adopted back in 2010. We've also undertaken a couple of district plans that were around our rail station areas as well. One of the things that we've struggled with here in New Bedford, though, is that we have a very tiny planning staff by most standards, other cities of our size, that is. So when we're undertaking the city master plan, for instance, we only have 4 full-time planners on staff. We currently are up to 5, and we've been reorganized a little bit with the Office of Housing and Community Development. But even with that being said, it would be very difficult to do a lot of the projects that the technical assistance has allowed us to complete in the city. So with that, Steve asked me to talk about some of the rail stations. Sandy asked me to talk about another streetscape project that we had done, so I've kind of merged them all into one. I won't speak too long, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end as well. As you may know, New Bedford has 2 proposed stations, one which would only have a platform, and that's the Kings Highway. This is located off of exit 4 on 140, if you're familiar where Flagship Movie Theater is, and the Savers, it's across the street from Stop and Shop. This is that area. It's actually 2 plazas that were built up over time. They had separate owners, and it was really a hodgepodge. If you drive out there today, you take your life in your own hands in that parking lot. It is, you come off of 140 to the plaza, you have to go right or left, you can't go straight in. Traffic's a nightmare. We are working with Serpent on that as well in Mass DOT. We have some future plans for that off-ramp. But when you come into the site itself, it's even mixed levels. You go up, you come around a dip curve, there's a lot of blind areas. We have drive-throughs for McDonald's. It simply doesn't work. So fortunately, the new owner of the plaza has actually bought out all 3 pieces. unfortunately, the rail still isn't here, so he may be moving ahead, but we're hoping they take more of a master plan approach at least, and we have been working with them. Gene has met with the owners as well. We see this since it's a platform only, the city owns no land in this area, that the market would really drive what happens here. And we see it as a mixed use, more of our heavy retail. This is where our big box retail is located in the city. It's the only area that we really have big box retail. On the east side is single-family residential homes, some elementary schools further on. So the idea was that as you moved west to the site, and 140 would be further west, it would build up, and we would allow for condos, townhouses, and the scale would increase as you moved into the more commercial side of it, keeping some amenities like the movie theater that is there, and just a true mix of uses, making it much more pedestrian and bike friendly and accessible for the students as well. And this would also be seen as the station that would be more of a commuter station for the surrounding towns of Acushnet, Freetown, Fairhaven, and possibly parts of Dartmouth as well. I think that's pretty much Kings Highway, so now, which is actually only about a quarter to a half mile just northeast of where we are right now. This would actually have the one station that would be built along with the project, hopefully. And this is on city-owned land. This is where the C Street Fast Ferry parking is currently located. So it really would be a multimodal station, I think, in the biggest sense, because we would have rail. We would also be proposing to move the SRTA bus station over here. We would have the C Street Fast Ferry, and of course, bike and pedestrian access. We do see this one, though, as being much more housing and townhouse or condos, and then services more like dry cleaners or coffee shops, something that you get on the go as a commuter and not necessarily compete with the downtown, because it is so close that we don't want to draw away from what we have going on here. This particular area, though, is very difficult to access because during urban renewal, we put in Route 18 and severed the waterfront from the rest of the city. Route 18 runs straight through the middle here. We do propose a bike pedestrian bridge, which would connect to the western neighborhood, which is Klasky Common and Acushnet Heights, which are a couple of our very historic neighborhoods. In fact, Klasky Common was the original town center, one of the original town centers of New Bedford. The very original village was burned to the ground by the British. We have some other ideas too for, we call this Route 18 Phase 3. Another idea that we have that we'd be pursuing in the future is maybe an at-grade crossing as well to the station for better access for the bus and vehicles. But those plans are further down the road. We're working on Route 18 Phase 2 in the south end right now. There's also a little competition with our cargo and how do we make sort of the working waterfront, which we protect and want to see flourish as well, really work with a commuter setting at this station. And I should have mentioned on Kings Highway, we are currently presenting, hopefully before City Council this spring, a TOD zoning overlay district for Kings Highway. At the moment, we don't have one proposed yet for Whale's Tooth because we're not quite sure if we want to do an overlay or a zoning change. Because we own this land, it makes it a little bit different. So we do have those two in the process. And these, I should say, were also done with through the technical assistance working with Goody Clancy on both of the station location areas. So that was Kings Highway. And now the last one that we did a few years ago in 2012, and this is, I've totally stolen it, it's VHB's presentation, but it gives you a good idea of the work that we actually, the real work we got from the technical assistance, which we wouldn't have been able to do on our own given our staff size here. So if you're familiar at all with New Bedford, this is the Route 6 intersection, which is just up the road here between us and the Whale's Tooth Station. This is where Mill Street and Kempton Street come in. The Route 6 bridge comes in from the west. You have Pleasant Street and South 6th Street coming up to it, and Purchase Street heading south. So we call it the octopus. It's really a septopus, but we go with the octopus. Everybody knows that and can pronounce it. So when VHB started, we really wanted to. We knew the octopus is a major challenge here in the city. We've had fatalities. We've had a pedestrian killed there. It's a very dangerous intersection. The lights are very outdated. There is a crosswalk, as you can see. Oh, that's the other one. There is another catwalk here, but it's one that kind of zigzags up. It's very old, it's outdated, it doesn't meet the ADA standards of today, and we're actually going to be demolishing it. So there were a number of issues, and it's really an impediment to get from Acushnet Heights, Wales Tooth, Pulaski Common, and the downtown, even though we're only a half-mile apart. So we're really trying to make those connections. So that was sort of the scope of the work that VHB was working with, and they came up with a process to do a couple of public workshops with us and some preferred alternatives. So I'll go through this kind of quickly, but I think it gives you a nice idea of what we got out of the process. Again, this was just sort of the process that they went through with the kickoff, meeting with us. We had a steering committee, and we finished up actually on time too, in June of that year. So these were the issues that VHB looked at initially, and so you'll see Wales Tooth is the yellow, and then that's the Pulaski Common area where the Teal is, and that's actually the common over there, and then downtown, so it's very close together. But you can see that this is the octopus here, and it's very wide, it's very long, and there are all the cars and turning radiuses coming in there, turning movements, I should say. So these were some of the ideas they started picking out of what we might want to enhance or what we needed to address as well. And then they came up with a couple of alternatives for us, and I should note that we were working with the public at the time, but then we also knew that we didn't really have the funding yet, so we stopped them with the two alternatives. And when we reached the point in time when we do have the funding, we'd pick up where we left off, basically. But the idea was really to make it more pedestrian friendly, so you can see all of the streetscaping that they have at both locations, sidewalks, because there are not sidewalks the entire way. In fact, at one spot where the ground, there's a tremendous slope and a change. You're really out there walking and the sidewalk just disappears, and it's the width of about 4 lanes along with a fire station, so you can imagine how hectic that can become in trying to cross there. Again, so this is the octopus here. A lot of this really just simply came down to, oops, there we go. Came down to really just the improved sidewalks, crosswalks, and new intersections there, and then improving this little park that we have. We also have the courthouse here and another courthouse just south of it, so it gets very busy, and very busy with visitors that aren't familiar with the city as well, which makes it even, I think, more difficult for some people to get around this area. Currently, we don't have bike lanes, so this was just another proposal. They looked at all options on how to improve bike and pedestrian safety. And then again with the streetscaping, and so they took a look at downtown and what we wanted to extend up from the downtown to the Pulaski Common neighborhood, and how we could really improve the pedestrian feel of this location. That's actually one of the outlooks or a vista that you would be able to see over the water there. And these are just more of the streetscape I'll go through quickly. Again, that's the fire station, and one problem we have right now is when you're walking out there, as I said, the sidewalk ends on that side as well. You're in front of the fire station, no one knows where they need to be. There's not even like the fog line or anything on the road right now. So this would be, the proposal from VHB was that brick and what looks like a concrete sidewalk, the concrete would be there, but the brick would either be painted or it would be flush so that the engines wouldn't have any trouble, but it clearly shows where the pedestrians should be. And you can see in the top that there's really nothing to guide people of where they should be, or the pedestrians can be there either. Here's some of the other ones. Those are some of the visuals that they gave us, which were very helpful working with the public who weren't really familiar with some of the terms. And then this was an idea too of, even in our city master plan, we noted that the Route 6 octopus is a gateway for the city. It's 195 as well, it's the Route 6 bridge, everything kind of comes through this area. And so some of their ideas were to enhance this with maybe some flags or special lighting or just any ideas, even public art, and also for the state to kind of clean up some of their sides as well. You can see that in the top. And that's the catwalk that I mentioned earlier, and that's actually to be demolished if spring ever comes this year, because it's actually condemned at the moment and not accessible at all. And that's more of an overview too of coming in from the Route 6 bridge, and that's it existing today. So you can see the difference in the streetscaping anyway. this was the end of VHB's presentation, but I will say this was 2012. We're just beginning 2015, but at the end of last year, the Department of Public Infrastructure here in the city has CDM Smith on retainer, so we use a lot of consultants here. They actually took VHB's work. We applied for a MassWorks grant to do this and some other work here in the city. We did not get that. However, we do recognize that the Octopus is a very dangerous intersection, so we're actually using our own Chapter 90 funds and doing the physical intersection itself, so that while we're taking down the catwalk, and we know we have a Melville Towers, there's a lot of seniors and people with accessibility issues living there. We know that they really do need to get through this intersection. There's a Walgreens on the other side, so they're back and forth a lot. So we're using that funding, and we'll be doing new traffic signals, new crosswalks, the bump outs, the street trees, new sidewalks, everything basically that VHB proposed, but only in that one intersection itself, as well as looking at the timing of it all. So currently go out and push a button and wait quite a long time if it changes. Not all of them even work right now. What CDM Smith has worked out is that all but 2 crosswalks, you don't even need to push the buttons. We'll be doing concurrent crossings with the vehicles, and they've made it safe to do that and have worked out the timing. So it should be a great project, and as I said, the first step will be taking down the catwalk this spring, and then they'll also hopefully be breaking ground later this spring on the intersection itself. So, as I mentioned before, I think the city's really benefited greatly from the technical assistance. These are just a few of the things that we've received. We're actually working with the technical assistance this year on our housing production plan. Correct? Okay. That's the other side of the department. So we've really gained a lot from this and benefited from it greatly. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has them.
Any questions for Jill?